And that is the role of the filmmaker, to have good taste, to know what is good, to know when the noodles are right, to know when the soup is right, to understand what good customer service is, to know what a good hello is when people enter your shop. Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I'm a director and editor traveling through Japan. And today I'm going to be talking about the film Tampopo. Tampopo is a movie that is about ramen. It's also about life, it's also about sex, it's about a lot of things. But it's the perfect movie to be reviewing while I'm here in Fukuoka. Fukuoka is to ramen what New York City is to pizza. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's not the birthplace of ramen, but it is maybe the place that is the most famous for ramen nowadays. This is a great movie to review since I'm here, but it's also a great movie to watch before you come to Fukuoka or before you come to Japan, because it'll get you really excited to eat lots of amazing ramen, which is what I'm going to be doing in this video. The film is about these truckers that stop at this terrible ramen stand, but it's run by a very charming widow. So one of the truckers, named Goro-san, falls in love with this widow and wants to help her turn her ramen stand into the best one in the area. And he does so by eliciting help from a bunch of people and teaching her how to understand detail and care about the little things that make ramen so good. So that's the main narrative of the story. But the film takes these little goofy tangents, following a person that walks by, for example, and going into a little kind of absurd, goofy story about them for a little while before returning back to the main narrative. So this is an absurdist movie, and before I go on, because of the fact that it is a little bit arty and absurd, I actually would encourage you to watch the movie first before you watch the rest of this review. If you watch this channel a little bit, you know that I don't believe too much in spoilers. I think the idea of spoiling a movie is a little bit overblown by a lot of people. I do, however, think it applies when the movie is very artistic and very absurd, because I would encourage people to watch a movie like that first and formulate their own ideas about the meaning behind the movie before they watch somebody else's interpretation, because coming up with a meaning and an understanding of a movie is really a huge part of a film like Tampopo. So this film does a lot of breaking the fourth wall. It comments on itself a lot. It's very similar to something like Monty Python or even Blazing Saddles. It's got a very silly type of comedy to it, but it also has a deep sort of meaning. In a lot of ways, it's kind of similar to some of the absurdist films from Europe, Playtime, or even like Buñuel, The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. I can feel like there's influences to that kind of comedy and those kinds of movies, because there's a deepness to the comedy, and the comedy is there to say something. There's definitely a social commentary to Tampopo, like with those European films. I would say the meaning behind this film for me is that it's a celebration of food and a celebration of life. I think the most impactful scene for me is the one in which the man's wife is dying and she makes fried rice one last time, and he starts yelling at the children who are crying to enjoy the last meal that she cooked. It's both absurd and pretty emotional and sad. It perfectly highlights the contradiction of life, what it means to be alive, that we want to appreciate living, but we also don't want to suck the fun out of life by over appreciating it. And I think this is the main crux of this film. This is the main contradiction that this film is trying to point out, that life is there to be appreciated, but oftentimes when we appreciate too hard, we take a lot of the fun out of it. So if we think about this man yelling at his crying children who are sad that their mother died, and he's saying, no, you have to enjoy this last meal she cooked, don't waste it. It's such an absurd idea. But on one hand, it's also like a very real feeling that a lot of us have of like, oh, we don't want to waste these moments of our life, but in not wanting to waste them, we end up kind of destroying them, if that makes sense. Like, imagine being the kid who's getting yelled at for feeling sad their mother's dying and having to eat this rice. Could you really enjoy it if you're forcing yourself to try to enjoy it at a moment when you are feeling genuine grief? I think that is the paradox of appreciation, or forcing yourself to appreciate things. I think another really important theme of Tampopo is the importance of standards, while also ridiculing social rules and this one right way attitude that often occurs when we feel like we know the good way to do something. The perfect example of this is in the spaghetti scene where there's a woman trying to teach them not to slurp their spaghetti, but then they look over and there's a man sitting there, a European man, slurping his spaghetti and enjoying it. And so then everybody starts slurping. And it's kind of like, yeah, you can you can enjoy things in many different ways. You don't have to always be so refined in your enjoyment. And I think that the allegory of food in this film is perfect because it maps onto art so well. Using food to discuss philosophies on art is what I think this movie is doing. And if we're honest, art itself is about life. It's about discussing your thoughts on life. So this film is using food to discuss what it is to live. And oftentimes, what it is to live is related to sex. There's that famous saying, everything is about sex except for sex. Well, I think in this movie, everything is about sex except for the parts about ramen. I say that because when you watch it, you can see that there's a clear horniness to this film. The egg swapping scene is probably the most famous scene, and it's very shocking, very erotic, great, very sexual scene. Also pretty gross, but I guess, sex is sometimes gross. Yeah, it's just masterfully filmed. It's, you're not seeing anything sexual, but two people swapping an egg yolk back and forth and having it break and dribble down the woman's mouth. Pretty sexual, pretty great, pretty perfect way to film it. When I say that, everything's about sex except for the ramen, I think the ramen parts seem to be more about love. You have the relationship with Goro and Tampopo that is brewing over this perfection of a ramen. You could see this as a way of them trying to figure out the right way to love each other and perfect this perfect relationship. And there's no right way. There's lots of different ways to make a good bowl of ramen, and there's lots of different ways to make a relationship that works. Back to the stylistic things about this film and the breaking of the fourth wall and the absurdist style of following different characters and moving over here and going over there. We also have characters commenting on the movie itself. Goro constantly makes reference to himself being a director. He's directing the ramen shop. And I think that the reason this is in the film is to really highlight the fact that this movie about making the perfect bowl of ramen, is an allegory for being a filmmaker. So that's, I think, the hint that he's trying to make, is that this stuff, these philosophies that he is putting forth about what it means to enjoy food, is also about what it means to enjoy art. I think that that's our biggest hint, that this is what he is getting at, bringing all these people that you know together and who are all good at something, like somebody who's good at soup, somebody who's good at noodles, somebody who can make the shop look nicer, somebody who can fix Tampopo's clothes and make her look better, figuring out how to remember people's orders. This could be perceived as all the different aspects of filmmaking, and Goro is the orchestrator. He's not really doing any of these things, but he knows about everything, and that is the role of the filmmaker, to have good taste, to know what is good, to know when the noodles are right, to know when the soup is right, to understand what good customer service is, to know what a good hello is when people enter your shop. All these little details that you have to know and you have to work on. And so what this film is doing is talking about how we can work to make our art or our film as good as possible without sucking the fun out of it, and there's many different ways to do it, but the pursuit of trying to make something as good as possible is a worthwhile one. And it's one that's interesting. The trucker coming into the shop and having this urge to do this thing, that is the artist. He at one point says, "Why am I doing this?" And it's a thought that I think a lot of artists have as they're in the middle of like deciding, okay, I'm gonna create this piece of art, I'm gonna make this ramen shop or this film. In the middle of it, they think, why do I do this? I don't know really, but deep down you do know. It's this desire, this uncontrollable desire to perfect something, to make something as good as it possibly can be. That is the motivation of the artist, and I think this film is celebrating that and saying that is a worthwhile motivation, as long as you're not pretentious about it. So those are all the themes of the film, and it's just such a good, fun film to watch. I think from a form standpoint, it's also very enjoyable. The acting is fantastic. Tampopo and Goro have a really good chemistry, and Tampopo is very charming. The script is very unique and fresh. This idea of this frame story of perfecting this ramen that then goes off on these weird tangents that you have no idea what to expect. I did not think that two people were going to be swapping an egg yolk in this movie. I did not think I was going to see a guy bite into an oyster, have his mouth bleed, and then have a woman suck the blood out of his lip. The little vignettes take it into this kind of genius masterpiece realm, in my opinion. And I really love that absurdist kind of feel to it. I would like to see more movies that have a vitality and just a willingness to do weird things, to have a gangster that gets shot in the middle of your film and dies and then talks about, the time he cooked a pig. I would say that the framing of this film isn't flashy, but I mean, there's some really great framing. I'm thinking of the scene where Tampopo is learning to remember everyone's order. The way that the camera is positioned in the ramen shop is great. I mean, there is really perfect framing in these little spaces, these little tight ramen shops, and the way that the camera moves about the spaces is excellent. And the editing isn't flashy either, but the way that the main narrative transitions to somebody walking by. I mean, honestly, as you're watching the movie, sometimes you don't even realize it. You blink and you're in this side story. You've wandered into a new movie in a way, and the way that they edited that is just perfect and seamless, which is as good editing should be. So I think technically as well, this film does a lot. It's not just the script and it's not just the themes and the ideas. There's also a lot of technical mastery, as there should be in a film that is talking about perfecting art, right? So I think that this film is totally wonderful. I am really, really excited to watch more films by this director. This is the first one I've seen, and it was a great film to watch, being in Japan and going around. Something to say about the new way that these reviews are being done as I'm traveling. I definitely think film doesn't have to always be detached from our life experiences, right? I think a lot of times we picture the nerdy film lover sitting in a dark room watching movies all day, watching all these experiences that he never had, living vicariously through the films that they watched. But I also think there's another way to enjoy films, which is to let it augment your life. So when you go to somewhere like Japan, you watch a film from Japan. When you go, when you're learning about something in school, maybe you watch films about that history. When you realize you have an interest like cooking, watch films about cooking. I think that there can be a blending of our life experiences and the films and the cinema and the art that we enjoy and appreciate, because that's really the point of art. The creator is making this film because they care about this topic, and you as the viewer don't need to just learn about topics through film. You can know about a topic and then watch a film to help augment your experience, and maybe you'll enjoy it a lot more. Like, if you start running, maybe there's a movie about running you can watch. I don't know, Chariots of Fire? I don't know. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Perfect. I think travel and film go together so well, because film is so much about space and place and time and things. And so anyway, that's my little rant about movies. Thanks for watching the channel. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Definitely check out Tampopo. And if you have any films that you would like me to review, Let me know in the comments below. See you guys next time. Bye bye.